Namaste, welcome to Nirveka Vidya. In this video, we shall look at chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Dhyana Yoga. Now, this is a fairly important chapter when it comes to the net point of view, or even from a yoga point of view, because here is where we see Krishna talking about yoga as we know it right now in a more detailed manner. Now, the chapter begins by Krishna making a distinction between renouncing work and renouncing the fruits of work. Karma tyaga, which is renouncing actions altogether, and karma phala tyaga, which is renouncing the fruits of action. Condemning the former and extolling the latter. He says that he who just desists from work, he who just quits doing work, he's not a yogi. He's not. That is not the ideal that one needs to aspire for. The ideal that one needs to aspire for is to reach a state where one is able to renounce the fruits of work. One is engaged in actions. One does all the work that is required of him, and yet he does not get attached to those works. So that's how the sixth chapter begins. Now, this is a direct response and a better response to the question that Arjuna asked in the beginning of the fifth chapter, where Arjuna asks Krishna, which is better of the two? Is sannyasa better or is karma better? Now, there is an inherent flaw in the question in the sense that Arjuna thinks that they are divorced of each other, that sannyasa is a different thing and karma is a different thing. Whereas what Krishna is trying to say here is that karma combined with sannyasa is what one needs to practice. One has to be engaged in actions. Not even getting engaged in actions is not something one needs to aspire for. One has to be engaged in actions, but at the same time, one has to have the attitude of sannyasa. One has to do actions as a yajna, in the sense that he needs to be in a position where he's detached from the work. So Krishna says that renouncing the fruits of work is what one needs to aspire for. For one who is desirous of scaling the peak of yoga, Krishna advises dedicated self-effort and incessant work. So he says that work is what will take you to the top. So it is not helpful to renounce work altogether. If you're desirous of advancing spiritually, it is work alone that will take you there. It is self-effort alone that will grant you that status, and therefore it has to be resorted to. For such an aspirant, the self becomes the sole means to elevate himself. It is also his greatest friend and worst enemy. Popular shlokas again from the sixth chapter. Krishna lays emphasis on attaining self mastery and being equanimous in the face of the various pairs of opposites. Now, we enter into Dhyana Yoga, which is the main topic that is dealt with in this chapter. The method of undertaking Dhyana Yoga is as follows. The method of undertaking meditation is described by Krishna as follows. Living in solitude is recommended. This again is a common recommendation, a popular recommendation that we find across various scriptures. For example, in the Hatha Pradipika, we find Janasanga Parityaga, which is renouncing social contact, as one of the things which ensures the success of a yogi. So that is recommended. We also see that the yogi has to live ekante matika madhye. So we see that being alone, solitude is something which is prescribed of a person who wishes to advance along the path of yoga. The seat that the yogi should adopt should be clean, neither too high nor too low, and covered with a cloth, deer skin, and kusha grass placed one over the other. The yogi should keep his body, head, and neck erect and focus on the tip of his nostril. I'm not explaining any of these because these are fairly self-explanatory, and I'm sure most of you know these shlokas. In this position, he ought to make his mind one-pointed and control the activities of his mind and senses, thereby attaining self-purification. So this is how Krishna describes the process and method of meditation. Certain key points regarding Dhyana Yoga. Krishna gives utmost importance to moderation and regulation of life, without which yoga cannot be achieved. He says that a person who sleeps too much or sleeps too less, a person who eats too much or eats too less, a person who is active too much or is too dull and inert, such a person who does not have a sense of moderation in his life, he cannot attain yoga. The important shloka from this chapter again, which also is a definition of yoga, is yuktahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha, which means to a person who is moderate in all respects of his life, in his wakefulness, in his sleep, in his eating, in his activities, in playing, All these things, to such a person, yoga becomes the destroyer of all his miseries. Yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Dukkhaha means destroyer of miseries. Yoga becomes the destroyer of miseries to such a person. An important shloka again, a definition of yoga from the Bhagavad Gita. A yogi who engages in dhyana in the prescribed manner attains peace and ultimately attains liberation. Practice of yoga is prescribed as the means to overcome attachments and desires by Krishna. We've seen that Krishna repeatedly says that one needs to give up attachments, one needs to have equanimity, one needs to give up his desires, give up his anger, all these things. So here Krishna provides dhyana yoga as the method to attain that state. It is by meditating, it is by undertaking dhyana that one overcomes all these obstacles. Perfection in yoga grants endless bliss to the yogi, attaining which he craves nothing else. Now, after Krishna has imparted all this to Arjuna, Arjuna makes an observation. He makes a remark. After listening to Krishna's exposition, Arjuna remarks that since the mind is hard to control, Dhyana yoga is therefore difficult to practice. He says, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna, Pramati Balavadridam. It is very hard to control. It is Vayoriva Sudushkaram. It is as fickle as the wind, and therefore I don't see how this can be practiced. The mind is so fickle, it is like the wind, and therefore I do not see how this technique that you are prescribing here, I don't see how it can be practiced. Now, Krishna replies saying that it is true that the mind is fickle. It is indeed very hard to control. Asamshaya mahabaho mano durnigraham salam. It is very hard to control. And yet it can be achieved by the practice of abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa, vairagya, again we see Patanjali advancing in his Yoga Sutras as the means of overcoming the chitta vrittis. Abhyasa meaning practice, and vairagya meaning detachment or dispassion. Abhyasa is the practice of what is conducive to attain perfection, and vairagya is dispassion or detachment for anything that won't help you in that path. So these two need to be practiced, is what Krishna says. He adds that only a man of self-control can achieve yoga. Arjuna then asks Krishna, what happens to a practitioner who fails to attain perfection in yoga in this birth despite having faith? So the question that Arjuna asks, the second observation that he makes is, suppose a person has embarked upon the path of yoga, and he's full of faith, but he does not have a lot of willpower, so he is not able to make great progress, and eventually he dies without attaining perfection in yoga. So the question Arjuna asks is, what happens to such a person? He's put in so much effort and he's also made progress, but he's not made enough progress to attain perfection. So what happens to such a person? What does he attain? What has he attained because of all these practice? Now Krishna replies saying that there is no ruin that befalls a yogi. Such a yogi who has failed to attain perfection in his prior life, is subsequently reborn to either pure and prosperous householders or to wise yogins. He says that the latter is a more rare case. Being born to yogins is a rarer phenomena. But the idea is that a person who has made significant spiritual advancement in his previous life would carry forward that whatever advancement he's made to his next life, and would be born in an environment, would be born in a family which is conducive for him to carry on the practice from where he left it off. There he acquires memory of his past life's practice and picks up from where he left, ultimately attaining perfection. Therefore, pratyavaya dosha. Pratyavaya means reducing or reverting. The defect of reducing or reverting does not apply to yoga since no effort goes waste. There is no pratyavaya dosha for yoga. Whatever effort that one puts in this life, it would be carried on, and he would enjoy the fruits of it in his subsequent lives also. Therefore, there is no wastage of the effort that one puts in. The greatness of a yogi who attains perfection through the course of many lives becomes free from sins and attains the supreme goal. Krishna eulogizes a yogi as superior to the tapasvis, performance of austerities, jnanis, who are the knowers of the Vedas. Adi Shankara interprets the term jnani to refer to a person who is just well versed in the Vedas. He has not understood the import of the Vedanta. He has not understood he has not realized the truths that the Vedanta contains. He is just well versed in them. He just knows what they contain. Someone who has just mastered the Vedas. That is how Adi Shankara interprets it. So one should not, according to Adi Shankara, one should not think that Krishna is glorifying the path of Dhyana Yoga, vis-a-vis the path of Jnana Yoga. That is not what Krishna is attempting to do here. There are multiple instances where Krishna does speak very highly of Jnana Yoga also. And the Karmis, who are the performers of Vedic rites, the Karma Kandins, the Mimamsakas, and calls on Arjuna to therefore be a yogi. Tasmat yogi bhavarjuna. You be a yogi because it is so great. Being a yogi is such a great status to attain, and therefore you be a yogi. Krishna concludes by declaring that the best among the yogis are those who meditate on him as their innermost self, are full of faith, and are absorbed in him. So, this is the final shloka of the 6th chapter. Again, as I told you, this is a relatively important chapter when it comes to the NET exam or when it comes to yoga as such. And therefore, it is better to pay a lot more attention to this chapter. Now, with that, we come to a brief summary of the 6th chapter, which is Dhyana Yoga. If you liked the video and found it useful, kindly do subscribe to our channel. Also, share the video with whoever you think would benefit from it. Thank you.